Howdy mates, good late morning. How are we doing today? It is Sunday, September 29th, 2024. And Green Day woke me up as September was approaching its end, by the way. That was goofy. Anywho, welcome to the Devil's Garden. This is towards the northern tip of Arches National Park in terms of its boundaries. This is a section of the park that I had never really explored that much. And so I am taking that opportunity to do so. You may have noticed as I'm walking through here, there are strips of the slick rock sandstone that we've mentioned before. But in particular, what you're really seeing at the moment are what are known as fins. So we have a great example just ahead of us. So called that name just because they highly resemble looking at a fin of an aquatic species, such as fishes, for example, or sharks, as an instance. And so, initially, as arches form, like an arch itself, it usually starts out as a fin. But at one point, where we are walking, this was all at one point one large block of sandstone. But due to uplift and pressure and erosion, it created these fins that you're even seeing further out in the distance there. Pretty darn cool. And so you figure what happens is with these fins, the water will eventually approach the lower part of the fin where it is a bit more erosive. And eventually that will allow an opening to form. Therefore, an arch is created. Generally, a rule of thumb when it comes to an arch, it has to be at least 3 feet wide on both sides, and it must have an opening as well. There cannot be anything between that opening either. Yeah, there's a bit of a couple of rules of thumb for an arch to be considered an arch. Give me just a second here. Alrighty, here's a transition to another part of this video. Here we have an example of the cryptobiotic soil crust. And if you were to visit at really any part of Arches or even southeast Utah, the cryptobiotic soil crust is by far one of the most important components. It's like a keystone species. Wow, keystone landmark. That is some of those dark mounds that you're seeing. The soil crust in particular is made up of a number of separate organisms. The main organism that it's made up from is known as cyanobacteria, specifically, for the most part, Microleus vaginatus. That's the name of the species. And basically, the cyanobacteria, it's a form of blue-green algae which resides on the soil crust. But then you also have lichen, separate fungi, and even moss too, for another. So what the cyanobacteria does in particular is it forms these mucilaginous strands. And what those strands do is they essentially help hold the sandy soil together. But that's not the only thing. This biological soil crust has the ability to also provide nutrient recycling, because much of the plant life that is found here, for instance, this black bush, it's not able to convert atmospheric nitrogen into a usable form. But the organisms within the soil crust do have that capability. So basically, they can use the nitrogen cycle by fixing atmospheric nitrogen and turning it into a usable form, which typically includes nitrate. And moving on from that, you figure since it has moss, for example, within it, the soil crust has a great infiltration rate, or I should say absorption rate. It has this remarkable ability to take as much water as it can. Therefore, the strands that I mentioned have a way of expanding and are able to spread the water within the network of the soil crust. But there is a catch, though. The soil crust alone takes several years to develop. It's very slow growing. And the thing is, it's able to withstand pressure from, say, below, or maybe even coming from the side, but it cannot withstand pressure directly from above. So that's why I'm sure some of you have heard of this phrase, "Don't bust the crust." Well, it's very true, because the soil crust takes several years to recover from any trampled foot damage. And so, as a final little point worth making is, since its recovery rate is slow, it is recommended to try staying off of it if you can. Absolutely. Because if too much of the soil crust is damaged, there's going to be more loose sand and erosion that will occur. Therefore, the plant diversity within such an ecosystem will decrease. So there you have it. Now you know why parks like Arches, for example, use such a phrase. All right, you guys, take care. Journey on a Journey is onwards. See ya.